I want to bring in MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid in Dubai. Kevin Barron is president of Elevation Global Strategies, former executive editor of Defense One, and the former VP of the Pentagon Press Association. Charlie Sykes is the author of the Substack newsletter To the Contrary. And with me in studio, MS Now national security reporter David Rowe. David, I want to go to you because I know you've been in touch with some officials in the region. Is there a legitimate chance here that this threat could be avoided by coming to some kind of deal?
I spoke to two Persian Gulf diplomats just in the last hour or so. They are skeptical. They say there's no progress that they see in the negotiations at this point, that, they're skeptical of any deal before the 8 p.m. deadline. One of them specifically cited the fact that Vice President J.D. Vance is in Hungary. President Trump has said that Vice President Vance, along with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, are the prime negotiators with Iran. So the sense I'm getting is that seen in the region is that the U.S. is not serious about this. But just separately, again, two Persian Gulf diplomats saying they don't see major progress and they think the chances are low of a deal before 8 o'clock tonight.
So, Charlie, that raises a question. Where does it leave us in these hours? Is this where we are? An unpredictable commander-in-chief making threats against tens of millions of innocent people to obliterate an entire civilization based on, he said this in the past, his own gut feelings?
Hey friends, Dr. John here. So what just happened, guys? Historians suing to preserve presidential records just pushed federal judges to the edge of issuing an emergency nationwide injunction, one that could seize White House servers and freeze all document deletions. Trump's team is panicking, calling it a judicial coup, but judges already rejected his emergency stay. Legal analysts put the odds at 70% that by tomorrow, Trump loses the ability to destroy a single record, locking in everything he's desperate to erase. Let me break down exactly what is happening. The D.C. Circuit judges, the federal appeals court that handles major cases involving the executive branch.
This is the way the monsters of history speak. And we're talking about a man who controls the world's largest nuclear arsenal, bleeding out threats of genocide and war crimes. And the threat itself, I think, feels like a turning point for America's role in the world, where we used to be the shining city on the hill. And I think the rest of the world is going to look at the United States as a dangerous rogue nation. There were people who thought that, don't take Donald Trump too seriously when he was threatening to invade Greenland. And I think we look back on that as the end of the Western alliance. This particular threat, where he's talking about wiping out one of the world's oldest civilizations, whether he follows through on that or not, feels like a turning point in America's 250-year experiment in liberal constitutional democracy, because I certainly can't remember any other time when any leader of a liberal democracy has threatened to destroy a civilization.
Well, I guess, Kevin, then that becomes an obvious question. And the people you're talking to, do they consider this bluster or do they consider this a real threat?
Are signaling they are about to issue an emergency injunction. This is not a normal injunction. This is a nationwide order that could fundamentally change how the White House operates. The plaintiffs, the American Historical Association, are asking for a complete freeze on document deletions. They want the court to order that no presidential records can be destroyed. Everything must be preserved. And not just preserved in theory, but actually protected. That could mean seizing White House servers.
I mean, you have to take it as a threat, but he's known for bluster. Look, I view this in the lens of covering the military for a couple of decades and covering a lot of stories about civilian-military relations. And if you think of the old Hollywood version of events, it's usually the generals who want to, bomb more, they're more aggressive, they want to go to war, and it's the politicians who hold them back. Here, we're at a place, an unbelievable and remarkable place where I'm hoping and I'm pretty confident that the generals are going to save us in a way that, the Trump supporters were angry and upset, in the last time around when we found out the same thing was happening. The Pentagon.
I need to stop you there. Because are you saying you think that they can talk him out of it, or that if push came to shove, they would defy orders? What are you saying?
No, I say, Politico's own reporting says that the military leadership has created a more extensive target list, hoping that they can make justifiable strikes. They're still going to claim these are dual use things that they're going to hit, things like, the grid and the power plants. But, in our modern era, dual use can be data centers down the street. It can be the electrical pole outside. It can be a lot of things, but like the president is saying. But it's up to the military to pick those targets. And I'm hoping, and I have faith that those leaders are going to do their best to be precise in what they do. Trump isn't handpicking all these selections despite the bluster. None of that erases the warning. None of that erases all the dire statements the other panelists and I've been hearing all day on TV saying.
Putting them under judicial control, making sure Trump and his team cannot delete emails, cannot shred documents, cannot destroy evidence. The judges, based on their signals, are seriously considering granting this. The timing is critical. The lawsuit was filed just days ago, and already the judges have scheduled an injunction hearing for tomorrow. That is lightning fast. Courts usually take weeks or months to schedule hearings. This is happening in days. That tells you the judges see urgency. They see irreparable harm. They see that if they do not act fast, evidence will be destroyed, records will disappear, accountability will be impossible. So they are moving at breakneck speed. Trump's team is scrambling. The plaintiffs' arguments are powerful.
That, yes, this is an unprecedented moment that Trump has brought us to. He's alienated the rest of the world, alienated our allies who are begging him not to do this. They're not following him into the war. They're not following his demands to protect the strait. The United States is alone. I do have comfort, and I'll love you, Charlie, but I don't know that this is the end of democracy unless nobody does anything about it and Trump continues on into the future. And whether that's people changing his mind or changing the target list tonight or voting for a different government down the road. I've come from international conferences recently where people have said flat out, they come up to you and say,
they are citing Trump's Mar-a-Lago conduct, the fact that he already hoarded classified documents once, that he already took records that were not his, that investigations found he did it for personal business interests. So we know Trump will destroy or hide records if he can. That is established fact. The plaintiffs are also pointing to the Epstein ties. They are saying Trump has motive to destroy records that show his connections to Epstein, that show his inner circle's connections, that contradict his public story. So there is both precedent and motive for Trump to destroy evidence. That makes the case for an emergency injunction much stronger. Trump's team filed an emergency stay motion. They asked the court to pause everything, to not issue the injunction. They argued this would be a judicial coup, that courts do not have the authority to seize executive branch servers, that this violates separation of powers. But the judges rebuffed Trump's emergency motion in a closed session that lasted 2 hours. 2 hours is a long time for a closed session. That suggests the judges heard Trump's arguments, considered them carefully, and rejected them. Now they are moving forward with the injunction hearing. Legal analysts watching this say there is a 70% chance the judges grant the injunction, that Trump loses, that everything gets frozen. The plaintiffs are citing a major precedent, Nixon versus the General Services Administration from 1977. That case is strong. It established that presidential records belong to the American people, that presidents do not have a personal property interest in them, that courts can enforce laws protecting those records even against presidential objections. The judges in this case are clearly taking that precedent seriously. They are signaling that Trump's Office of Legal Counsel memo claiming he can destroy records violates Nixon. It tries to give Trump powers the Supreme Court already said presidents do not have. So the injunction is coming, and it is going to be massive. Think about what this means. If the judges grant this injunction, if they freeze all White House documents, Trump cannot delete his Iran threats. He cannot erase emails about the Venezuela invasion. He cannot destroy records of his Epstein connections. He cannot shred evidence that Congress needs for the impeachment investigation. Everything is preserved. Everything is protected. Trump's entire strategy of destroying evidence and covering his tracks dies. He cannot do it anymore. The courts will not let him. That is terrifying for Trump because he knows what is in those records. He knows what they show, and he knows that if they are preserved, if they come out, he is finished. The hearing is tomorrow. The decision could come hours after that. Trump's presidency could be fundamentally changed by a court order that prevents him from destroying evidence. Let me dig into the details of what this emergency injunction would actually do and why it is so significant. This is not a routine court order. This is potentially the most aggressive judicial intervention in executive branch operations in modern history. Let me start with what the plaintiffs are asking for. The American Historical Association, in their lawsuit, won an emergency injunction that does several things. First, halt all deletions of presidential records. No emails deleted, no documents shredded, no records destroyed in any way. Everything Everything that exists right now must be preserved. Second, they want the court to order preservation of digital records specifically. In the modern era, most records are digital. Emails, text messages, documents stored on servers. Those are easy to delete. You just hit a button and they are gone. The plaintiffs want the court to order that those digital systems be protected. Third, and this is the most aggressive part, they want the court to potentially seize White House servers or put them under judicial oversight. That would make sure Trump's team cannot just ignore the order and delete things anyway. The legal basis for this is strong. The Presidential Records Act is clear. Records created during the presidency belong to the American people. They must be preserved. They must be turned over to the National Archives. The president cannot just decide to destroy them. That is what the law says. But Trump's Office of Legal Counsel memo claims the law does not really apply, that presidents have discretion, that they can destroy records as personal property. The plaintiffs are saying that is illegal, that it violates the act, that it violates Nixon. They are asking the court to enforce the law to stop Trump from violating it. The judges are signaling they agree. Now let me talk about the hearing schedule for tomorrow. What happens at that hearing is critical. The plaintiffs will present their case. They will argue that irreparable harm is happening right now, that Trump is destroying records as we speak, that without an injunction, evidence will be lost forever. They will present evidence to support that. Trump's Mar-a-Lago conduct, his pattern of hoarding documents, his recent Iran threats that he would want to hide, his Epstein meltdown showing he has motive to destroy evidence. All of that will be presented to the judges. Trump's team will respond. They will argue that courts do not have authority to interfere with executive branch record keeping, that this is a separation of powers issue, that granting this injunction would be unprecedented judicial overreach. Then the judges will decide. Based on the signals so far, the judges are leaning toward granting it. How do we know? Because they already rejected Trump's emergency stay motion. That motion was Trump's attempt to stop this process before it even got to a hearing, to say, no, we are not doing this. This is too aggressive. Courts cannot do this. But the judges heard that argument in a 2-hour closed session and said, no, we are moving forward. That tells you they think the plaintiffs have a case. They think an injunction might be appropriate. When legal analysts say there is a 70% chance of it being granted, that is based on these signals, on the judges' actions so far, on the strength of the legal arguments, and on the precedents. Nixon is really important here. That case dealt with Nixon trying to control his records after resigning. The Supreme Court said no. Presidential records belong to the people. Congress can pass laws protecting them. Courts can enforce those laws. That was a unanimous decision, a strong precedent. The plaintiffs are arguing that the same logic applies here. Trump cannot override the Presidential Records Act by claiming personal ownership. The Supreme Court already rejected that argument. Trump's Office of Legal Counsel memo is unconstitutional. The court should strike it down and issue an injunction to prevent Trump from acting on it. Now let me talk about what happens if the injunction is granted. This would be massive. First, no more deletions. Trump and his team will be prohibited from deleting any records. If they violate that order, they are in contempt of court. They could be fined. They could be jailed. The stakes will be high. Second, potential seizure of servers. If the judges believe Trump's team might ignore the order, they could order that White House servers be put under third-party control. Maybe a special master, maybe the National Archives, someone independent who makes sure records are not deleted. Third, full preservation for the impeachment investigation. Congress is investigating Trump right now. They need records. If those records are preserved under court order, Trump cannot hide them. Congress can subpoena them. Trump cannot claim executive privilege or destroy them. They are protected. This connects directly to the Epstein situation. The resurfaced Epstein files are showing Trump's inner circle connections. There are probably more records that have not been released yet. Internal White House communications about Epstein, about how to respond to the allegations, about Trump's relationship with him. If those records exist, and they probably do, Trump will want to destroy them. But if there is an injunction, he cannot. They are preserved. Eventually, they come out and Trump's lies are exposed. Same with Iran. Trump's threats to obliterate Iran are documented, but there are probably internal records too. Meetings where those threats were discussed. Advisors warning him not to say that. Military officials expressing concerns. All of that will be in White House records. If those records are preserved, Congress can see them. The public can eventually see them. Trump's recklessness is documented. He cannot claim he was measured and thoughtful. The records show what really happened. The Venezuela invasion, same thing. There are records of how that decision was made. Who advised Trump? what intelligence was presented, whether legal concerns were raised and ignored. All of that is in White House documents. If Trump could destroy them, the full story never comes out. But if they are preserved under court order, accountability is possible. Congress can investigate, prosecutors can review, history can judge. Trump's team calling this a judicial coup is revealing. What they are really saying is that courts should not be able to enforce the law against the president, that Trump should be above the law, that he should be able to destroy evidence even though the Presidential Records Act says he cannot. That is not how democracy works. In a democracy, everyone is subject to the law, even the president. If the president violates the law, courts can stop him. That is not a coup. That is the rule of law. That is the whole point of having an independent judiciary. But Trump does not see it that way. He sees any constraint on his power as illegitimate, as an attack, as a coup. That mentality is authoritarian. That is the mentality of someone who thinks they should be able to do whatever they want without accountability. The judges are pushing back on that. They are saying, no, you are subject to the law like everyone else, and we are going to enforce it. The political implications are enormous. If this injunction is granted, if Trump loses the power to destroy records, Republicans are going to have to defend it. They will have to explain why Trump should be allowed to destroy evidence. That is a losing argument. Most Americans think records should be preserved. Most Americans think presidents should be accountable. Republicans defending Trump on this will get hammered. With midterms coming, with impeachment ongoing, with multiple crises converging, this injunction could be the final straw, the thing that breaks Trump's remaining support. That convinces enough Republicans to turn on him. That leads to his removal. Internationally, this sends a message that even the American president is subject to law, that courts can check executive power, that evidence cannot just be destroyed. In a world where authoritarianism is rising, where leaders in other countries are consolidating power and avoiding accountability, this matters. It shows that democracy can work. That rule of law can be enforced even against the most powerful person in the country. Let me bring this all together and talk about what this potential injunction really means for Trump and for American democracy. This is a pivotal moment. A moment where courts have to decide whether they are going to enforce the law against a president who is trying to destroy evidence. Let me break down the key takeaways that matter most. This injunction would strip Trump of his ability to cover up his crimes. That is what this is really about. Trump wants to destroy records so that his Iran threats, his Epstein connections, his Venezuela decisions, all of it can disappear. No evidence, no accountability. But if the court grants this injunction, that strategy fails. Everything is preserved. Everything can be investigated. Everything can be used in impeachment proceedings or criminal trials. Trump cannot hide. That is terrifying for him because he knows what he has done. He knows what the records show. And he knows that if they are preserved, he is finished. The speed of this case shows how seriously judges are taking it. Filed days ago, hearing tomorrow, that is incredibly fast. Courts do not move that fast unless they see genuine emergency, unless they believe harm is happening right now. The judges clearly believe that. They believe Trump is destroying records as we speak, that without immediate intervention, critical evidence will be lost. So they are acting fast. That should terrify Trump because it means the judges are not going to give him time to keep destroying documents. They are going to shut it down immediately. Trump's judicial coup rhetoric is backfiring. When you accuse judges of staging a coup for enforcing the law, you look guilty. You look like you have something to hide. You look like you are afraid of accountability. That is exactly how Trump looks right now. He is not arguing that the Presidential Records Act does not apply to these documents. He is arguing that courts should not enforce it, that he should be above the law. That is not a winning argument. It makes him look authoritarian. It makes him look desperate. It undermines whatever sympathy he might have had from moderates or independents. This connects to impeachment in a critical way. Congress is investigating Trump right now over Iran threats, over unauthorized wars, over potential war crimes. They need records to make their case. If Trump can destroy those records, impeachment becomes much harder. But if there is an injunction preserving everything, Congress can get what they need. They can subpoena documents. They can see what Trump knew and when. They can prove abuse of power. This injunction is not just about historical preservation. It is about whether impeachment can succeed, whether Trump can be held accountable right now. That is why Trump is fighting so hard against it. The Epstein angle adds public pressure. People understand Epstein. They understand why Trump will want to destroy records of his connections. They understand why those records need to be preserved. The historians can argue about abstract presidential records. But when they bring up Epstein, when they say Trump wants to destroy evidence of his ties to a sex trafficker, that resonates with the public. That creates political pressure on judges to act. That makes it harder for Trump to win because nobody wants to be the judge who let Trump destroy Epstein evidence. And this is maybe the most important point. This case is about whether the rule of law survives. If Trump can destroy records in violation of the Presidential Records Act, if he can issue memos saying laws do not apply to him, if courts cannot enforce those laws, then we do not have rule of law anymore. We have rule by Trump. We have one person who is above the law, who can do whatever they want. That is not democracy. That is autocracy. The judges deciding this case are not just deciding about documents. They are deciding about whether America is still a nation of laws. Based on their actions so far, they seem to understand that. They seem ready to enforce the law, even against a president who claims he is above it. Here is what really strikes me about this moment. Trump has created every single one of these crises himself. The Iran threats, his choice. The Epstein connections and lies, his choice. The attempt to destroy records, his choice. None of this had to happen. Trump could have governed lawfully. He could have preserved records. He could have been transparent, but he chose chaos. He chose cover-up. He chose to try to destroy evidence. Now he is facing the consequences. An emergency injunction, a possible total document freeze, loss of power to hide his crimes, all because he could not control himself, could not govern responsibly, could not resist the urge to cover up. Where does this go from here? The hearing is tomorrow. The judges will hear arguments. They will probably issue a ruling quickly, maybe the same day or the next day. If they grant the injunction, everything changes. Trump cannot delete anything. White House servers might be seized. Records are protected. Trump's cover-up strategy collapses. If they deny it, if Trump wins, then the destruction continues. Evidence disappears. Accountability becomes much harder. But based on everything we know, the signals from the judges, the strength of the legal arguments, the precedents, it looks like the injunction is coming. It looks like Trump is about to lose. When that happens, the floodgates open. Congress gets access to preserved records. Prosecutors can review them. Historians can study them. The truth comes out about Iran, about Epstein, about Venezuela, about all of it. Trump cannot stop it because the courts have spoken. The law has been enforced. Even the president has to comply. Politically, this is devastating. Republicans are already struggling to defend Trump on multiple fronts. Now they have to defend his attempt to destroy evidence. They have to explain why he should be able to violate the Presidential Records Act. That is impossible because voters understand this. They understand that destroying evidence is what guilty people do, that preserving records is what the law requires. Republicans defending Trump here are toast. They are going to get destroyed in the midterms. Trump's presidency, already hanging by a thread with impeachment and 25th Amendment calls, might not survive. Because if even judges appointed by Republicans are ruling against him, if even the courts are saying he is violating the law, how can Republicans keep defending him? At some point, the answer is they cannot. When that point comes, Trump is done. Trump's team is reeling as federal judges gear up for an emergency injunction that threatens a total document freeze. That is the story. But the deeper meaning is about accountability, about whether Trump can destroy evidence and escape justice, about whether courts will enforce the law. It looks like the answer is yes. The courts are going to act. The injunction is coming. Trump's cover-up is about to fail. That is the really big news here. Not just that there is a lawsuit, but that Trump is about to lose it. When he does, everything he has tried to hide becomes evidence.